I'm a strong believer in proactive M&A. I think there's obviously people out there and companies out there that unfortunately have a very reactive view to M&A. M&A, I think, has to be a part of your company's growth strategy, and the business unit leaders or the C-suite or whatever the case may be, they need to understand that if they are looking to do acquisitions, it is another tool in their tool belt. You can't kind of approach things on a one-off basis, like, hey, one of our competitors or some other company suddenly decided that they're going out to market and we're going to look at possibly doing that acquisition. I think it's very easy to get distracted that way, do bad deals, and tie up resources internally that end up that end up really scuttling kind of any potential acquisition.
Welcome to M&A Science, where leading M&A practitioners share lessons learned from their experience. If you're interested in keeping up the latest from M&A Science, visit mascience.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. Every Monday, we share highlights from these interviews, and we also send out invitations to events as we build the greatest community of forward-thinking M&A practitioners. Again, that's mascience.com. I'm your host, Kison Patel, CEO and founder of M&A Science. Joining me today is Sabeeh Khan, Director of Corporate Development at Infoblox. Infoblox provides cloud-first networking and cybersecurity services. Today, we're going to talk about how to effectively source deals through market mapping. How's it going, Sabeeh?
It's going good. How are you?
Doing well. Can we kick things off with a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I've gotten, now 8+ years of corporate dev experience. I got my start in corporate development actually on the software side. And then eventually kind of a transition to a few different companies, but stayed mostly in the technology space. Done about 12 deals now, both domestic and international, various sizes, but mostly in the lower middle market. And throughout all the companies that I've worked with, I've had a chance to work with some really talented people, learn from a lot of folks, and so I'm excited today to talk about kind of market mapping and I'll say this just to kind of before we kick things off. There's probably a lot of different ways to do this. I'm just going to share today, I guess, what kind of my approach has been. And so, hopefully we'll answer some questions from folks as well.
I'm looking forward to it. I know you previously hosted courses on M&A Science Academy.
Yes.
So this is nothing new for you.
Yeah.
And but I think it's a fun topic that doesn't get talked about a lot. How do you actually develop a market map? So let's jump into it. How do you create a market map?
So I think the process for creating a market map really starts first with a couple of conversations, and it depends on the industry that you're in, obviously, as well. My background is obviously in software, so today I think what I want to do is share a couple slides that talks a little bit about why you would really build a market map to begin with, and kind of how that drives your M&A strategy, and hopefully I can kind of preempt some questions here. So just give me 1 second. Let me get that up on the screen here, and we'll go from there. All right. So market mapping or ecosystem ecosystem mapping really is a pretty useful exercise, I think, for M&A, and it kind of works hand in hand with corporate strategy, right? So before you dive into a market mapping exercise, you got to understand, first of all, at a company-wide level, what is the corporate strategy? Hopefully there are some corporate strategy folks internally that will help determine what that looks like. In the background to all of this, obviously, is your buy versus build decision-making process. That kind of touches everything here that we're going to talk about today. But really, the objective of a market mapping exercise is to kind of increase relevance within the served industries through strategic acquisitions, right? And the software company that I worked at previously, we had 3 or 4 different verticals. with, obviously it was kind of ERP software. And so that's the example that I'm going to run through today. And each industry, each vertical would have a unique market map. And it literally is a map, as you can see from, the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here. And so the approach there really is, you want to identify companies that are wallet share stakeholders within the customer base. You want to group and categorize companies by segment and by primary function. You want to stack rank them. And it's really an ongoing conversation that you have with the business unit leaders or the corporate strategy team, or all of the above. And the result of an exercise like this is that, you're able to document an ecosystem with all the key constituents defined. You can really kind of narrow down and focus in on your M&A priorities, so you're not wasting time. And you get a deeper alignment within your with the business units on what your M&A strategy is going to be, right? Because a lot of the times your business unit leaders might say, great, we need to acquire a company. They might have an idea of one or two companies that they want to pursue. But this is a really great, way for the corp dev team to be on the same page with those business unit leaders in terms of what makes an attractive target. Why are we targeting them? It kind of facilitates a lot of those conversations. And obviously you want to identify sort of any overlap between, your various industries and verticals. And again, the benefit of all of this is you increase wallet share, you drive stickiness, you increase recurring revenue for if you're in the software space. You can accelerate your ROI for market share expansion opportunities. And it really, again, is a more purposeful approach to M&A.
So what I'm getting is learn the strategy, get aligned around it. Going through this exercise helps you define M&A priorities and
Yes.
also align with your various business unit leaders.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. It facilitates, honestly, a lot of conversations, and it's an ongoing process. So it's one that is not done in a silo. It's, corp dev isn't off kind of building their own market map on their own. There's a lot of collaboration with the business unit leaders, with the product team, if it's applicable, with the corporate strategy team, if there is one. And you do this while you're building out the ecosystem map or the market map, and then also periodically afterwards as well. So every quarter you might have, a re-ranking, if you will, of some of these things based upon either your M&A activity or your competitor's M&A activity, right? Ideally, it doesn't, the categories don't change, but maybe the types of targets you go after change. And obviously you have to be nimble enough to respond to market forces. So if competitors are really making headway in a certain space and you need to move in that direction quickly as well, then maybe you reprioritize temporarily to go after targets that maybe were a little bit lower down your priority list, right? So this isn't meant to be an exercise that's kind of set in stone. It's more of a helpful guide, really.
What about C-suite folks and the board? Are they involved with this?
Yeah, actually. So they may not necessarily be, deeply involved in the day-to-day of building out the ecosystem map, but certainly I think it facilitates a lot of those board level conversations. Certainly when you have your board asking you, well, what's the game plan? Who are we targeting? Or as has been the case with me throughout my career, you're getting tons of decks and teasers from the board every so often, and they're asking you what your thoughts are on this on this potential acquisition target or that potential opportunity. A lot of those decks and teasers can be missing the mark or just not opportunities that are a priority. And so this is a useful exercise as well to get them to understand exactly what types of companies you're looking for and why, and what the plan and the strategy is. And so it actually builds a lot of confidence, I think, with the board as well as the C-suite in terms of, them being comfortable that you know what you're doing.
You should really define the strategy before going out and building the market map, not the other way around.
I think, yes, I think the corporate strategy comes first, right? You have to figure out how you're going to grow organically versus inorganically, what the, strategic priorities are for the company. And then when you start to talk about your M&A strategy, that's really where this starts to come in to play a lot more. And at the same time, it's tough for me to say what came first, chicken or the egg, right? I think this is an activity that you do simultaneously when you're building out your M&A strategy or your corporate strategy. But first you have to have your high level kind of corporate priorities set in stone, and then you can go ahead and say, okay, well, based upon our corporate strategy, we have an idea in terms of what our buy versus build strategy is in terms of features and functionality and and things like that. We need to use M&A to plug some of the gaps that we have. Great. How do we go about doing that? Well, this is where you start to kind of build out your ecosystem map.
How do you iterate on this? How do you get, when you mention all these different stakeholders, you're creating this collaborative effort to get different folks involved. How do you keep that ongoing where you get some of those ideas that can come from all different areas, be it board member or product manager? But is this a tool to help facilitate some of those ideas to you? So you can say, yeah, it fits in our market map, or give them the understanding of it, or sort of use that as, hey, it doesn't currently fit in this market map, but we'll put it somewhere in a parking lot.
I think like I mentioned before, I think this is a useful exercise to facilitate those conversations. So when you have an opportunity that comes across your desk, let's say it's something that is a low priority for you, but the board is pushing you to do the deal. Now you have something in your hand that says, hey, guys, appreciate that you guys really want us to pursue this transaction. However, we've had a bunch of internal conversations with our business unit leaders, our product team, our C-suite. We've identified what are strategic priorities for us, and this doesn't fit based upon this market map that we've created. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, you have to be somewhat flexible, but I think it really helps to get other internal stakeholders on the same page so that you're all kind of moving in the same direction, and people aren't paddling in different directions. So I hope that answers your question.
So I get the idea of how it can help with defining the criteria. So if you do get stuff out of scope, it's falling back on this market map and the effort created for it. But then how about the other end of helping some of those get a sense of what the organization is looking for, to even allow you to broaden your scope of potential identifying targets that fit with the market map?
Absolutely.
Do you find it as a tool to help communicate that and allow others to bring some of those opportunities to you?
Absolutely, because as a corp dev professional, you may think that you have an understanding of the landscape and what your competitors are doing, et cetera. But your product team or they're probably a lot closer to the customer base in terms of trends, in terms of what their demands are, what they're asking for. Your CTO or your corporate strategy team might have some other thoughts as well. And so this is an opportunity for each one of those internal stakeholders to influence the direction that the company is going to go in and the types of acquisitions that the company is going to choose to pursue. And as a result, maybe conversations that wouldn't normally be happening between, let's say, the product team and the strategy team or the C-suite for whatever reason, now you've created an opportunity for those folks to talk and discuss and obviously there's going to naturally be some conflict, and somebody has to, at the end of the day, kind of own it and say, appreciate that, taking in all those things into consideration, but I'm making the call on this, and I think this is a priority versus that. And that really varies by company, right? Because some companies, corp dev is very tightly, wound with the product team or the technology team. And in other companies, it's a very finance-driven organization or a very strategy-driven organization. And so, ultimately, who's responsible for the market map? I mean, that's a question that I think kind of varies a little bit depending on the organization that you're in. It could be a business unit leader, or it could be corp dev, but corp dev is really the facilitator and driving the creation of the market map, of populating all of the target lists, right? And try to see, which one it makes for an attractive acquisition opportunity versus which one doesn't. There may be a great company that does, XYZ, and it will be a dream for your company to acquire them, but maybe they just took in money a couple months ago and they're not going to be available for sale for a while. Well, you're not going to sit around and wait for them before you acquire another company, right? You're going to move on to the next opportunity. And so, there will always be a sort of a shifting of priorities a little bit back and forth, depending on, a number of factors. But this at least is like, it's like the equivalent of a roadmap when you talk about technology or product related, items. It's a checklist of like, here are all the things that we want, and here's the order that we're going to try to go in. And then as things come up, we'll reshuffle.
It's a good way to look at it. It's a roadmap, sort of build this vision of where the potential is for the company to grow into. Absolutely.
So actually, before, and we can get into the more questions in a second, let me just quickly kind of run through the rest of these two other slides that I put together. So this is kind of a zoomed in version of the ecosystem map. So again, this is probably primarily applicable to software, but you could really use this for any industry. And this in particular, this particular map is for, a construction management software kind of solution, or I guess for that space. So the center of the map, you have your core software, right? Whether that is, that's an ERP software, whatever your core solution is, that kind of sits in the middle of the map. Maybe you have there, within that main vertical, there are like two specializations that you're targeting, right? So, maybe there's more, or maybe there's just one, whatever it is, that kind of is the core of your software solution that you're selling to your customers. Surrounding that, there may be two or three or more kind of general buckets, right, as I like to call them. So in this case, you've got a sales and service side, a back office side, and an operations side. And then within each one of those buckets are these sort of subcategories. And part of the ecosystem mapping process is saying, and again, is having these conversations with folks internally, the product team, the strategy team, et cetera, and the business unit leaders, saying, well, what do we do today, right? And in this map, what we do today is denoted by this little check mark, right? Those are solutions that we have currently. What are our priorities? And you stack rank these things based upon a whole bunch of possible criteria. It could be based upon addressable market. It could be based upon your technological needs or the market's demands, any number of things, right? And so you have these conversations, you stack rank the large categories. Well, first of all, we have our core software. Let's just say you didn't have any check marks outside of your core software. Well, in this case, we decided that the very next thing that we need to add on that's most critical for us to retain customers is to add on a bunch of sales and service solutions, right? Then we focus on, doing some operations type of solutions. And then lastly, back office stuff, which is probably, not as important as the sales and service and operations piece. And the whole goal here, again, is to drive stickiness as much as possible and increase wallet share. And then again, once you have those broad buckets stack ranked, then you go through individually and say, okay, well, within sales and service, lead gen and digital marketing is top priority. Everybody needs this. Everybody's dying for it. And then a CRM solution, et cetera. And then you kind of go through this whole process. And what you get in the end is a stack ranked list of potential areas for you to pursue acquisitions. And underneath all of this, and this is, again, corp dev's responsibility, is coming up with a list of potential acquisitions, right? So this is a small sample of what your final work project might look like. You might have a list of companies on the left. I'll have and usually I'll do this in an Excel file or a spreadsheet of some sort, and I'll have a list of groups and then a group priority. And so these groups right here are directly tied to kind of these large buckets that we had identified here. The group priority is, again, based upon the stack rank that we had assigned to them, and then within the subcategories are the kind of the smaller buckets within the larger ones that we had identified. You would again assign a subcategory, priority. I guess some of these numbers are a little. I guess these numbers need to be fixed. But anyway, you would have still, lead gen and digital marketing would be a 1, right? Because this was identified as number 1, the most important thing within sales and service. And then within, let's just say these are both, lead gen solutions. Within that, corp dev would take a look at both of those companies and look at a series of ways to stack rank them in terms of, how much funding have they had, how big are they, what's their technology platform look like, when was the last time they took on funding, things like that. And you would basically assign your own ranking based upon how actionable an acquisition might be, right? And then the team ranking is more, it is kind of late in the process, and I'll get back to this in a second. So you repeat this process with each one of these categories that you're in, and in the end, you get a stacked ranked list of potential prospects. And then finally, again, once you've built this out and you've collected some background data on these potential targets, you go back to the business unit leader, whoever is responsible for the prioritization, of these acquisition targets, and you say, hey, take a look at these prospects that I've put together. Which ones are most attractive to you? Which ones would you like to do, immediately? And if you've done your job with the ecosystem map or the market map initially, there probably isn't too much reshuffling happening here, but the team may assign their own priority. And then, you start the process of reaching out. And as a result, you may not follow the team ranking, you may be following your subcategory ranking, but you have an idea of how important something is, or how important a particular company is based upon the team ranking at the end here. So this is kind of my way, the way that I've done it before. I'm sure there may be better ways of doing it, but this is something that worked for me pretty well.
And you can take this sort of detailed view, and then you make it look pretty, where you sort of get the clusters, put all logos on there, and
correct
to float around.
Correct. Yeah, this I've shown you, is the kind of the sausage being made. This is kind of like you could do an Excel spreadsheet, or in Google Sheets or a Smart Sheet or what have you, and you could even take an average score and stack rank based upon that. There's a couple different ways of doing these things. But this would be your main repository for the data, and then you can make it look pretty with, like you said, with logos and things like that. So,
can you talk to me about the research that you do?
Yeah,
for those companies when you got these initial categories defined, and it's time to go hunt and find targets?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of different ways of doing that. Industry events are a great way to get some intel and find out who's out there, who's in that space. White papers, publications, Gartner puts out research reports, things like that. Whatever you have access to is helpful. Obviously, nobody knows, those lines of business as well as the business unit leader or the product leaders. And so you talk to them and you get an idea of potential prospects. And then you start the process of actually doing your homework in terms of, finding out data points related to, again, how actionable an opportunity might be. So I just honestly start with a Google search. But, again, if you're in the software space or the technology space, you can use websites like softwareadvice.com, capterra.com, websites that help you figure out, well, what are all the companies that are out there? And you just one by one start going through their websites and trying to kind of collect as much data as possible. Perhaps you have a CRM solution for your pipeline management. And you just collect data around, what's their pricing like? How many employees do they have? Where are they located? Where are their customers located? What's their approximate revenue, right? And so there are a bunch of websites out there like Grojo and Owler and other ones that have varying levels of accuracy surrounding that. Crunchbase is another one as well. But you really just start the process of gathering as much data as you can and storing it, and then kind of making a decision about prioritization based upon all of those factors.
So check out the stuff that's right in front of you, the events, the conferences in the industry, connect with your internal resources, BU, business units, leaders, product leaders, and then do your research. Check out all these different, now there's so many of those product comparison websites that you can go
there are
through.
And there's a ton of information that's even freely available. I mean, I'll read through press releases and news articles about a company, from a couple of years ago, and it'll make some reference to what their revenue is expected to be or give you a range, right? And so okay, well, they when this article was published 3 years ago, they were around the $100 million mark in revenue. Well, it's been a couple of years since then. You can make some assumptions around growth and say, well, they're probably somewhere in the range of 150 million today or something like that. And then once you have the conversations with the companies, you get an NDA signed, then you can really start to confirm your data points. But just try to read as much as you can on the internet about those companies. And there's a ton of information out there.
You're not big on the third-party databases. You're not paying for whatever S&P, FactSet, any of the pitch books?
No, I'm not, because I've used those before. And so when I started my career, I came from a cold calling background. I used to be a stockbroker. And we use like the Dun & Bradstreet leads with like the revenue ranges and stuff like that. And I mean, I think that those have varying levels of accuracy. And when you're dealing with private companies, that sort of data is really difficult to get. Companies like PitchBook and CapIQ, will have some numbers, and they've got research teams behind them that try to give accurate information around those, around those figures. But a lot of that information is available freely. So, why pay for it if you can get it for free?
So very much, it depends on your industry. If it actually, maybe
Correct.
They cover it and gives you some unique data points that you wouldn't find online. But sounds like you're doing really well. I actually did a search for a client not too long ago on LinkedIn. Used good old Sales Navigator.
Yep.
Found a nice comprehensive list of potential companies for them.
There you go. So I mean, it varies really by industry, and there's a ton of resources. I mean, you can try whatever works for you. We've historically tried to use certain networks that maybe weren't geared towards prospecting, but were geared towards like fundraising and things like that. And we didn't have a lot of success with the data there. I did use it for a period, data.com as another kind of reference point when I couldn't find any data on revenue. Data.com had a Salesforce integration. I don't know if they still do, but certainly some years back. And it was just very easy for me to kind of look up the company on data.com and import that directly into my CRM and have that ready to go. Again, it was powered by Dun and Bradstreet data, and so sometimes it would show me a huge company and it would say, oh, their revenue is 30,000. It's like, no, it's not. Maybe that particular branch revenue is 30,000, but the company as a whole isn't $30,000 a year, right? It could be hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So you have varying levels again of accuracy, and you just got to kind of take that with a grain of salt.
We've been using Zoom Info for contact information.
Okay. Yeah.
Sweet folks.
Yeah.
Corp dev folks like yourself. That's how we find you.
Also, another great tool is Rocket Reach. I've used that a lot, especially when I'm prospecting and trying to cold email somebody. And I don't know what. Every company has a predictable methodology for how they structure their emails, but you can either try different ones and see which one goes through and which one bounces back, or you sign up for something like Rocket Reach and find their LinkedIn, and it'll give you a whole bunch of email addresses, personal as well as work related. And then we're
biased towards Zoom Info. They were nice enough to contribute to M&A Science.
Fair enough.
Give back.
Yes.
Let's talk about the funnel. What does the overall funnel look like?
That's a great question. And again, this varies by industry. If you're in the software industry, your funnel could be huge. Right. But if you're in a very niche space, or you're in a new industry where there's not a ton of people playing in that space, car sharing, ride sharing type of industry, maybe your universe is much smaller. I like to use a CRM to keep track of that sort of thing. You can certainly do that in Excel as well, and just keep track of kind of all the opportunities that come my way, who they came from. A brief description around what they are. And that way you kind of get over time, you build up a pretty good data set of where your opportunities are coming from, and you can focus on those efforts rather than kind of continuing to waste time with, potential origination, vehicles that just aren't delivering any sort of return.
So you're loading up prospective companies, getting a general idea. A lot of that is based on the number of companies you're going to end up looking at.
Yep.
And then you start identifying where those sources, who identified it, where the opportunity came from. What's your view on proactive versus reactive opportunities?
Yeah, great question. So I'm a strong believer in proactive M&A. I think there's obviously people out there and companies out there that unfortunately have a very reactive view to M&A. M&A, I think, has to be a part of your company's growth strategy, and the business unit leaders or the C-suite or whatever the case may be, they need to understand that if they are looking to do acquisitions, it is another tool in their tool belt. You can't kind of approach things on a one-off basis, like, hey, one of our competitors or some other company suddenly decided that they're going out to market and we're going to look at it possibly doing that acquisition. I think it's very easy to get distracted that way, do bad deals, and tie up resources internally that that end up that end up really scuttling kind of any potential acquisition. And so if you want to do M&A and you want it to be successful, which I think everybody does, then you've got to be proactive. You've got to identify your needs, and just as you would hire more salespeople and target a particular geography or whatever, or build a go-to-market strategy and focus on organic growth. Inorganic growth, has to be happening at the same time and with the same amount of effort.
Okay. You're not sitting around waiting for bankers to bring you deals. You're out beating the street, looking for opportunities.
Yeah. And the thing is like, if you end up waiting for bankers to come to you with opportunities, you may end up participating in auction processes. They can end up paying a lot more for a company than you really have to. You're proactive, if you're in the lower middle market anyways, Maybe you get to a business owner who hadn't really thought about selling this company, but now that you've approached him, is considering taking some chips off the table. And now you've got a direct line with the owner. You've got a deal that you can move on for hopefully less than you would in an auction process where you're competing with other financials and strategics in terms of trying to woo the CEO, right? So I'm a big proponent of proactive M&A.
I feel like there's other benefits too, that there's more consideration that you're putting in because now you can manage the timeline so it's beneficial for both sides. And you just sort of can really think things through, do proper
Absolutely.
diligence, make sure there's a good culture fit. Where my experience with the auction process is you tend to like skip half your steps
Yeah.
at the best. And
Yep.
then it's throwing the dice and getting the deal and then
Yep.
figuring out what to do with it afterwards.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes like you get an opportunity, like let's just say, for example, a competitor is up for sale. Maybe presents a really exciting opportunity for you to consolidate in the market, and you think we're going to do this deal. Well, great. Now you've done this deal, this transaction. You're on an expedited timeline to complete the deal, and you did it. I mean, you've given some thought, sure, to cultural fit, but you think no problem. We're just going to go ahead and sunset a platform or consolidate the customer base. But you haven't given a lot of thought, a lot of deep thought to the cultural fit, which is really, really important when you're talking about M&A. What's it going to be like for the customer experience? What's it going to be like for the employee experience? So yeah, absolutely. I think you hit that right on the head. I think you have a lot more time to sort through all those issues when you're proactive.
Tell me how you get the conversations going. We're going to go out. We're going to hunt. We did the research. We found the opportunities. Now we want to get the dialogue going and see if there's an opportunity to acquire this business. How do we do that?
Well, obviously, first step, like I said, is when you're doing your research and you're trying to find contact information for who the right person is to speak to at this company. Is it the CEO, or do they have somebody in corp dev, or do they have somebody, is it the CFO? Like, who is the right person? You make a judgment call on that based upon the size of the company and other criteria, and then I like to just craft out a cold email. And the way that I craft those cold emails is they can be a little bit longer, but I've had a lot of success with this, which is you break it out to kind of 3 or 4 main paragraphs. And, the first paragraph is introducing yourself, who you are, why you're reaching out. Second paragraph, might be, this is how we think, this is what we've learned about you guys and why we think this could be a good fit. Maybe the last paragraph is something along the lines of, hey, let's find some time to chat, even if you're not ready for an acquisition right now, no problem. Let's just at least get to know each other and build a relationship. Maybe at some point when you're already ready to pursue an acquisition, hopefully we'll be top of mind for you and you'll reach out to us. That sort of approach is very different, I think, from the approach of a lot of PEs, or VCs that will reach out to a lot of these companies and ping them. Their analysts are pumping out, 30, 40, 50 of these emails a day, and they're short emails trying to be very to the point, like, hey, your business is interesting. We'd like to acquire it. Let's have a discussion. When you take the time to articulate what your thesis is and why you think, a business would be a good fit for you, what that would mean for the market, right? And you articulate that in the email, we found that business owners are a lot more appreciative of it. We've had a number of them actually tell us that they really liked our approach. And the only reason they responded to us was because we obviously had done some research and we put some thought behind the email. And it's, more than likely led to an acquisition because of our approach to those cold emails.
You detail your thesis, you're transparent on your thinking.
Yeah, very, very transparent. I mean, we're very upfront about it. And we say, look, like, even if there's not an opportunity for us to acquire you guys, maybe there's an opportunity for us to partner on something. Let's just talk and see where it goes. And folks are responsive to that. It's that you're not trying to hide anything from them. You're not trying to be, sort of non-committal. You're saying up front, here's who we are. Here's what we understand about you guys. Here's how we think, the two of us could be a good fit together, and how we could tackle the market. We think it makes sense. Are you interested in a deal or not? And if you're not, let's just chat anyways and see where it goes.
So we've had a handful of inquiries the past year for potential acquirers.
Yeah.
And it was a typical PE pitch of, this is why we're so grand. Here's our track record. Here's other companies we've dealt with in the space, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the thing that was a big turnoff was there was no time or effort into understanding what our goals are in terms of, hey, like, do you understand where we're at in terms of our maturity and what we're trying to do? And I felt like that wasn't there. It was the me focus and to me, I'm like, hey, it sounds like you got a lot of, or even if it's a portfolio company that's looking to acquire, you got a lot of pressure from your PE firm to grow. And that's why you're reaching out, which I don't really give a, like, I don't care about. So is there an element there that you frame to really emphasize what the CEO of that company, or what does that narrative look like in terms of their near and long-term goals?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's built into the paragraph when you're talking about kind of why you think that the two companies would be a good fit together in terms of tackling the market, right? And you definitely include a sentence or two in there around, not sure what your plans are for the business or what you were thinking or even ready to sell, but we just figured it was worth reaching out to you and talk to you and get to know you a little bit, right? So that, leaves the door open. It says, hey, I don't know you, but here's why I think, specifically our two businesses could do very well together and why we should consider this. Your circumstances may be different and maybe a reason why you don't want to pursue this right now, and that's fine. Let's just get to know each other, right? If this is a relationship business, the reality of corp dev is it's driven by relationships. And so, you have that rapport with the business owner. You get to know them, you understand, I've had CEOs tell me about their family situation right out of the gate on their very first call. Hey, I've got a son who wants to take over the business, or I've been thinking about retiring, or, a family member passed away and I inherited this business. So you learn a lot about the owner and their motivations in that first phone call, by leaving yourself open to that.
Let's get to email to phone call. So you send an email, crickets, you get no response.
Yeah.
Then what do you do?
So I have a 3-strike rule. So I'll send the initial email. I'll wait a week. If I don't hear back, I'll send a second email. Obviously shorter than the first one. The first one, my longest one. The second one will be like, hey, not sure if my email got buried in your inbox, but just wanted to ping you and see if you were interested in having a conversation. Again, just to reiterate, we think it would make sense for us to talk for XYZ reason. But whatever's going on with you, we'd still love to at least have a quick 15-20 minute chat just to get to know you. Let me know what works for you. And then let's say you get crickets again, then I'll do, one last email. And if I get no response then either, maybe I'll wait 6 months before I ping them again. Right. But for the time being, if I sent you 3 emails and you haven't responded to any of them, and they're each one of them is a week apart, then I'm going to put you on the back burner. I'm going to move on to the next, to the next one on my list.
You don't start calling them?
No, I mean, I guess that is an approach, not my approach. The reality is people do read their emails, no matter how swamped they get. They'll at least look and look at the subject line. They'll know what the email is generally about. And if they weren't motivated to answer or even just say, hey, yeah, let's chat, I don't think a phone call is going to go over well.
I'd call them. That's
fair. Different approaches, I guess. I've done the hard sell. Like I said, I was a stockbroker. I used to cold call, 500 plus on average calls a day. I've done the hard sell. You get different types of customers that way, right? But again, I'm not looking to pressure anybody into a deal. When you're talking about an acquisition strategy, or you're talking about acquiring somebody, I don't think that's something that you should be kind of pushing a conversation or pushing someone to have that conversation if they're not ready for it. I think there's a chance that they might get irritated and say, stop calling me, stop emailing me. I don't want to talk to you. And maybe it's just because they're stressed out and it's just a bad time for them. And I don't want to blow up a relationship before it even begins. So, I'll email and then I'll get enough responses, and it works. You get enough responses that it doesn't make sense for you to sit there and cold call every single person because, on average, again, depending on how proactive you're being, I'm not sending out 1 or 2 emails a week, right? I'm sending out, 10, 15 emails. I'm targeting maybe the top 10 or top 15 companies on my list every week. And I'm saying who's ready to have a conversation and who's not, right? It's an ongoing process.
So there's some factors there where if it was, hey, this is the 1 or 2 that I really need to get after, you maybe even taking it up a notch.
Yeah.
And getting there.
So what I like to do actually, rather than pick up the phone, is then if I'm really, really desperate to do a deal or to get in touch with somebody and they're just not answering my emails, then I'll go to our board, or I'll see if we have some mutual contacts, and I'll see if I can get a warm introduction, rather than pick up the phone and cold calling a guy out of the blue. Right. My goal is to try to get in somehow.
Would you want to do that first? Try to get the introduction before doing the cold outreach?
Yes. In some situations, yes. But in other situations, I don't want to go to my board and every week and say, introduce me to this person or that person or that person, right? I want to do my own effort first. And then if there are a couple of kind of hard nuts to crack, that I've tried reaching out to a couple of times and they're just, I just can't get a hold of them. Then I'll say to the board, hey, do you guys know XYZ at this company? Can you introduce me? So that's just my approach.
Approach changes based on volume, what you're trying to accomplish, because
correct.
Again, big number may not make sense to do it, but if it is,
but if it's a small number, right, and you've got a board that's more active, that's constantly kind of asking you what deal you want to do and things like that, then maybe they're more receptive to setting up those intros for you, right? So it depends on the situation.
We get the response. Hey, Sabeeh, I'll grab a call. Here's the date and time. And, ring, first conversation. Yeah. What is that? Yeah. How's that framing go?
30 minutes. And it's just you basically let them talk, right? You've said your spiel in your email. There's really not much you should be adding there. And you just say, hey, thanks for responding. Maybe take 5 or 10 minutes to quickly recap who you are, answer any questions that they might have, maybe go into a little bit more detail, and then turn it over to them and say, you tell me, you answered the email. What's going on with you? Where are you with your business? What are you thinking? What are your plans for the business? Fill me in on what I'm missing. And that's when they go and they tell you a ton. Even without an NDA, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of folks that will, maybe they won't give you exact dollar ranges for revenue, but they'll tell you, hey, I've got X number of customers, or we're growing at X% every year, or I was at $1 million, 2 or 3 years ago, type of a deal. And you treat those conversations as confidential, even though you don't have an NDA in place. I'm not going around reselling that data to other companies, right? I'm just noting those things down for my own records, and then I'll get an NDA in place afterwards, and then we'll kind of get into the details and lots for the P&L after I get the NDA in place.
So we let them have the conversation, let them talk, really understand their plans and narrative. Is there angles or consideration about maybe timing right isn't directly to approach about M&A, but a partnership might be in the horizons? Is there things like that get framed around it? And I guess it depends on your organization.
It depends on the organization, and it also depends on the company, the industry, your company, what the appetite is for partnerships and things like that. Who handles partnerships? Is that something that corp dev handles? Is that something that somebody else handles? Maybe they say, hey, we're growing gangbusters, don't need any cash. Appreciated the phone call. We wanted to kind of get to know you guys, but we're just not ready to do a deal, and we don't see ourselves doing a deal. Well, if you really, really, really want to work with that company, maybe they have a really exciting product or feature that you need, and that you're lacking, or if it addresses a gap in your offering, then you say, okay, well, would you at least be open to a discussion about a partnership? And usually if it's not, an acquisition, then they're like, yeah, I'm happy to talk about a partnership and see if there's like a revenue share type of opportunity or something like that you can set up in a technical integration or something like that.
Do you ever get aggressive where it's, hey, I know you're not interested in selling right now, but nothing's on the market, everything's got a price. If there was a figure that would make something happen, is you have an idea what that would be? Is there some framing around that you actually
sometimes, rarely, but sometimes it depends on how the conversation is going, right? I mean, some folks, right out of the gate, they are not interested in doing a deal. They are fine. There's no number you can give them. They're young. They're just having a good time, right? But then there are some folks that you talk to that are maybe older. Maybe it's a family-owned business. Maybe they're in their 50s and they still got another 10 years before they want to retire. But you tell them, hey, depending on what your thesis is, the approach that we always had at past companies was, hey, we always love smart people. And, even if we were to pursue an acquisition, that doesn't necessarily mean that you would have to walk away from this business. We know it's your baby. We'd certainly let you stay on and run this business post-acquisition, but this is a way for you to take some chips off the table. Maybe there's certain things that you want to do with your career or with your life in general. And this is a good way for you to address that, where not so, you don't have as much of your capital tied up in this business. So, you can sell the business to us, you can take that money and do with it, what you will. And at the same time, you can stay on and help grow this business even more, because who knows this business better than you, right? And so for a lot of business owners, that's an exciting prospect. It's they not only get a chance to make some money off of their investment, but at the same time continue to stay involved in the business and grow it.
It's a good way to look at it and keep the options open.
That's right. So it varies really. It depends on the conversation, right?
Do you ever get somebody that's halfway, where they almost want to test you to see what kind of price that they could get for the company?
Yes.
And they're not serious about selling. How do you sense that out? How do you respond to it?
You can kind of sense it out. I guess I don't know how to quantify that or say definitively if someone gives you the signal. I mean, you can kind of get a feel for it. But the reality is that once you put a number out there for folks, right, they start counting the money in their head. So usually when they're halfway and you're putting out a valuation, my approach to valuation is, look, if I'm going to put a number out there, it's a number I'm going to stand behind. It's not a number that I'm going to put out there and then retrade later on and say, well, that doesn't, we said too much and this makes more sense. I'll look at the business. I'll say, look, honestly, like, we need some data from you. We need your P&L. We need churn data, et cetera. I'll come up with a valuation, and I'll, based upon synergies and all that stuff. And I'll say, this is a number that we believe in, that we think that we can hit, provided there's nothing material that we uncover in diligence. This is a strong valuation based upon market comps, based upon what's out there right now. And more often than not, those folks that are on the fence, all of a sudden they get a lot more interested in talking about a deal.
So you're not giving them a ballpark range. You'd move to preliminary diligence. So if they get to a point where, like, hey, we generally are interested, what does that look like? It's like, how do you stage it to start doing your preliminary diligence to come up with an offer?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different approaches to this, but I have like a list of 10 items that, I'll get an NDA in place, and I'll say, here are the 10 things that I need from you before we do any work in sort of real diligence. Here are 10 things that I need, right? They might be P&L, churn report, org charts, cap table, new hires, any sort of other financial or data that I need to be able to come up with a number based upon my own research, right? And then if there's any product specific data that I need, right? What tech platform, et cetera. I'll get all of that data, and I'll put together a model, and I'll come up with a valuation. And I'll say, here's what we're thinking. And if it's not a flat out dollar figure, maybe I'll give them a range, and I'll say somewhere between X and Y at that point, after I've done some research. I'm not in the business of giving people comp information. Oh, well, your company does $50 million in revenue, and based upon what the market is saying, it's worth 2x revenue. Like, no, that's not my bag, right? I'm there to give you a well thought out valuation on what your business specifically is worth to me, and what I'm willing to pay for it. And it's a number that I believe in. It's a number that I stand behind. And now the seller as well knows that you've put in work and you've given a number that's real, or a range that's real. And so that helps address a lot of those folks that are on the fence.
You ever do preliminary diligence and come to the conclusion this company isn't as good as we thought it was? This is one to walk from?
Usually you can figure some of that stuff out in your introductory call with the owner. If there are certain things about their pace, their growth, et cetera, that you're like, this just isn't it for me, then that's the point where you walk away. There's been one transaction that we were involved with that we didn't walk away from it. We probably should have, given what we learned about it. But we didn't. It was a business owned by a guy who, used to be in sales, started his own business, mom and pop type of a thing, family affair. His wife was doing the books and she's not an accountant. His daughter was doing some of the CRM management, and none of this, on the back end, none of the systems were talking to each other. The CRM didn't talk to billing, which didn't talk to the product. Like, they had no idea, like, everything was a manual process. And so the data was bad. That should have been the point for us to say, listen, there's something just doesn't smell right, where this doesn't seem like a deal we want to do. But we got desperate. We did the deal based upon, our own rationale, which was flawed. And it came back to burn us, right? In the end, we ended up selling the business back to the owner a couple of years down the road for $1. So that was one that hurt. But I think all the deals that I've closed, anyways, when we get to the point where we're actually in diligence, we've had enough conversations and done enough diligence that we're pretty comfortable at that point of pushing through to closing, unless there's something material that we're finding in diligence that says don't do it.
Any other tips, advice on building a market map in general?
Yeah, I would say, listen, different companies have different approaches, and some of them may have already done a lot of this legwork, previously. So, don't make the mistake of walking in thinking, okay, I'm their first corp dev hire or their second corp dev hire, and they haven't really done this, and I'm going to go out and reinvent the wheel. Just talk to people. You'll find a lot of the times they will have done some of this work already, or if it's not exactly in this format, they'll have some idea about where they want to go. And then you basically build that map on your own, and you start to, fill it in. But it's an ongoing conversation with those folks. It's never something where you just hand off to somebody and say, I've done all this work. Here you go. Here's what our plan is. It's more of like, here's what I did based upon what you told me. Let's talk about it. What do you think? And just listen to what they're telling you, because they're closer to the business than you are in corp dev.
What's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
Craziest thing that I've seen in M&A. I had a deal that I worked on, and it was during the pandemic. And the seller was so terrified of sharing information with our business team that they basically refused to let our own internal lawyers, our general counsel, look at contracts online. And so they literally wanted to take the contracts, in hand, paper contracts in hand, hop on a plane, fly out to a conference room, show them to us in the room, and not let us take notes and then take them back. And so we would have no chance to actually sit down and go through and understand the commercial implications of those things. And that was so unheard of and so ridiculous that we basically shut that down very quickly and said, we pushed and pushed and pushed and had a lot of conversations with the banker and the seller. And we're like, listen, if we want to get a deal done, you got to get over this hang up. We're not doing a deal without having our lawyers look at the contracts. We ended up negotiating a compromise, but I mean, it was crazy. Up until signing, they wouldn't let anybody on the business side look at those contracts. And even then, they would only give them a sample of like 10 of like the top 10 contracts. So outside counsel, third party counsel, they were comfortable with, but anybody within the umbrella of the company that I was at, they wouldn't let anywhere near those things. Even I had trouble working corp dev. I have no connection to the business side. I don't talk to them on a day-to-day basis or anything. I'm not selling, not dealing with customers, but they had a lot of issues. So I would literally read through the contracts 3 lines at a time. So it was obnoxious, but yes.
Deal paranoia.
Yes. Yeah, that was the worst. So
Sabeeh, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me. I really appreciate this walkthrough. I learned a lot on market maps.
Absolutely. I'm happy to. Thanks again.
Hey, well, cheers. Here's to the deal.